Hello, I am Elijah Armstrong, and this is another one of our Heumann-Armstrong Award videos. For those of you who don't know, the Heumann-Armstrong Award is an educational award for students in the 6th grade and up, including all forms of higher education, who have experienced and fought against ableism in school. And all of our winners receive a $1,000 award, and also we shoot a video with all of them, giving them a chance to tell their stories, and this is one of those videos. So I am really happy to introduce you to Casey Doherty.
On screen now are the logos for all four organizations: the American Association of People with Disabilities, the Quello Center, Equal Opportunities for Students, and Esquire Bank. On screen now is the logo for the Heumann-Armstrong Award and white text on a gray background that reads Present 2023-2024 Heumann-Armstrong Award winner Casey Doherty, illustrated by Access Gallery.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my story. My name is Casey Doherty. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair. I'm currently wearing a long sleeve black shirt and a gold necklace.
A headshot of Casey. Casey, a young white woman with long blonde hair, sits on the top step of an outdoor staircase. In the black background is a tan and glass door. Casey is wearing a red shirt with the words "Still Sick, Still Fighting" written on the front in white and red lettering. She also wears a pink watch and black leggings.
I'm from upstate New York, and I currently live in Washington, D.C.
An illustration of Casey in the same position.
I am just finishing up my graduate degree in disability studies from the City University of New York School of Professional Studies, and I received my bachelor's degree from Georgetown University.
Casey at Georgetown.
So my disabilities are myalgic encephalomyelitis, long COVID, and tick-borne diseases. Going forward, I'll refer to myalgic encephalomyelitis as ME. ME affects my life the most. I developed it from a COVID infection a few years ago, as well as from other inflammatory diseases I have. It was very jarring to develop ME. I had dealt with fatigue for many years, but suddenly I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't walk much. I couldn't really read. My vision wasn't the same. And many more symptoms added to that. The best way I know to describe how that was feeling was kind of like the feeling of being poisoned or like having the worst flu you could ever imagine.
Casey sick in bed.
An ME is often caused by a viral infection, like it was for me. 25% or more of people with ME are housebound or bedbound, and approximately 75% are unable to work. It used to be called chronic fatigue syndrome, but that often makes people think that this is just fatigue, which it is definitely not. ME is a chronic multi-system disease characterized by post-exertional malaise, or PEM. And PEM is an exacerbation of symptoms following ordinary physical or cognitive activity. So I experienced PEM after doing things like showering, talking on the phone, or walking short distances.
Casey exhausted after walking.
And when someone with ME, like myself, pushes themselves too much, doing something like showering, they may experience a temporary or permanent decrease in functioning, like a very major crash. And the disability ME looks very different in each person. Each person's symptoms will be kind of varying, and they're difficult to predict or manage. Some people use mobility aids, some people cannot get out of bed, some people can get out of bed but not leave their home. It really varies widely and can fluctuate within a single person very often. So right now, I fall in the mild to moderate range of ME. I'm able to get out of bed if I rest often. Sometimes I can walk short distances. I'm still able to work, and I'm very grateful to be able to be a student. And I want to really make clear that my experience at ME is not at all universal. I have friends in the ME community who cannot sit up in bed, speak often, or watch TV. I also have friends who can do much more than I can do. And so what I want people to know about ME is that it is very unpredictable and symptoms can fluctuate. And the most important things to do are pace and rest. I absolutely love school and I love being a student. I've always loved courses where I can conduct research and learn about policy. I've thoroughly enjoyed my graduate program in disability studies, and I am immensely grateful that I've been able to complete my degree remotely and asynchronously. And this allows me the flexibility to complete schoolwork when I have the most energy. And I'm fortunate that many of my professors are also disabled and they understand what it's like to be a disabled student.
Casey doing research on her computer.
And overall, my disability studies program has really allowed me to learn about my community and myself, which I'm really grateful for. And then outside of school, I work for a federal government agency doing consumer protection work. And I organize with the groups ME Action and the Chronic Disease Coalition. I live in Washington, D.C., so I attend protests and events, both virtually and in person, with these groups when I'm able to. And with ME Action, I'm currently working on developing an accessible protest guide to share with organizations.
A group of people wearing masks, protesting.
I became disabled by tick-borne diseases in college and then further disabled by ME years later. So I've had some time to reflect on how that impacted me in my schooling career. And when it first began for me, suddenly I was extremely fatigued. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I didn't have the knowledge or the language to kind of say what I needed and ask for accommodations. I was always weighing my options between going to class and feeling awful and potentially worsening my disabilities, or staying in bed and risking a lower grade. And really a structural barrier to me are the ableist attendance policies that often force me to attend class when I felt absolutely awful. I remember, sitting in class fighting to keep my head up and listen to my professors and my peers, and I really just couldn't focus on anything but my pain and fatigue. And then I would leave class, go home, and just sleep for hours. And I still didn't really know what was wrong with me, so it was a very jarring experience for me.
Casey with her head down in class.
And I also faced ableism in the form of intense academic culture as an undergraduate. Students are encouraged to be studying all day and night, working jobs and internships, and joining countless clubs, and resting was not seen as normal or acceptable. And I also was just at that time told by doctors time and time again that, you're a college student, you're just stressed, you're going through a lot, which, that's true, but also that's not the whole picture. And I had no diagnosis at that point in college, and I didn't know what was happening to me. So I had really no idea how to seek accommodations when I didn't have, that sort of language to help me figure out what could best serve me in an educational environment.
A doctor dismissing Casey's concerns.
Yeah, so my accommodations kind of process was kind of interesting. As I've shared, it took years for me to kind of figure out what was wrong with me and to determine my disabilities, and for me to learn what accommodations would best serve me. Now I know that I need virtual access to school, as I cannot travel to and from class or sit in a classroom for hours without resting. With the ongoing COVID pandemic and, no or very limited mitigation measures, I can't risk infection from my professors or my classmates. And so a very helpful aspect of my graduate program is that, as I mentioned, my classes are virtual, so that takes care of that accommodation measure. But they're also asynchronous, which means that, pretty much nothing is happening live, which I find extremely helpful because I can complete my schoolwork when, I'm in the best kind of shape to do so throughout the day or throughout the week. And I find that has helped just enormously. And one of my biggest accommodation challenges is that many schools have decided to stop offering virtual options. I had dreamed throughout undergrad of attending law school, but there are very few virtual or hybrid options. And so I'm so lucky to have had access to my graduate program, but there are very few similar programs available, even within like the disability studies space, which I find, so disappointing. And I think about, so many schools and other institutions made changes early on in the pandemic. And those changes could have been continued, allowing more people safe access to education. But, since then, so many measures have been dropped. And the lack of flexibility in educational programs means people like me can't participate at all. Disability rights and disability justice mean everything to me. I feel that disability justice is especially important because it has that focus on intersectionality and cross-movement solidarity, which we know is just so critical. We need to be connected to other movements, all movements, and fighting together for all of us to thrive, especially those of us with marginalized identities, particularly those of us with multiply marginalized identities. So, while we're working on fighting ableism, we need to be fighting classism, racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, and so much more, because all of those, are interconnected, and the multiply marginalized identities face more violence and discrimination and stigma. And when I think about disability justice, I think about my own identities. I'm a white person with other privileged identities, and I know I must always be aware of the space that I'm taking up. And a lot of what I've learned about disability justice and activism, I've learned from activists who have come before me, especially those affiliated with ME Action and ACT UP. Judy Heumann is, of course, a hero of mine. I've also learned from and been supported by my professors in my graduate program, as well as the folks at my fellowship at Partners for Youth with Disabilities, especially Nicole Homran. I also really admire the work of Imani Barbarin, Eli Clare, and Whitney Defoe, to name a few people who I look up to. Those folks have just taught me so much about intersectionality and disability justice, and as well as just how to understand my own experiences with disability and kind of, own my own narrative and be able to share my story. So I'm very, grateful to have come across all these people.
Eli Clare and Imani Barbarin.
So once I kind of understood and reflected on my own disability identity, I tried, as much as possible to lean into opportunities to fight for the rights and opportunities of other students with disabilities. And so after I graduated from college, I helped some of my professors make their courses more accessible and switch them to a virtual format in 2020. As I mentioned, even something as simple as removing or changing an attendance policy can make courses so much more accessible. And then as a fellow with Partners for Youth with Disabilities, I created a guidebook with some other disabled students for disabled high school students and shared disability studies curriculum with teachers. Looking back, I had almost no exposure to disability studies or disability history in my K through 12 education, and I really want to change that for others. I think it's so crucial that students are exposed very early on to the principles of disability justice and learning about disability history.
Casey creating a disability studies class for high school students.
And then as an undergraduate student, I helped create a course about Title IX and sex discrimination in education. And I really, really enjoyed that process in developing an accessible and comfortable and safe educational environment that, I always wished I had had. And then in the future, I hope to fight for increased virtual access to the classroom in particular, which expands access across the board. We've spoken about how it increases accessibility for disabled students, but also parents and working people and so many more people. And I care deeply about supporting students in understanding and advocating for the accommodations that they need. First, I want to see federal, state, and local governments invest so much more funding in education accessibility. Like I've mentioned, I hope to see virtual and asynchronous educational options expanded. I want schools to implement pandemic safety measures like masking and ensuring cleaner air. Schools must hire disabled staff members. Attendance policies should be revised, and the list goes on and on.
Air filters being installed in schools.
Some pieces of advice I would give to students with disabilities are, first, knowing that you belong there and you deserve 100% access to your education. I know that it can be so hard, advocating for yourself, but I hope this interview series shows other students that they're not alone. I'd also like to offer advice for fellow students with invisible energy limiting disabilities. From my own experience, you may be questioned or disbelieved, but you know yourself best. I hope every student knows that they are not just the sum of, the work that they produce or their grades. We're so much more than that, and we deserve rest and kindness and accessibility in our education. Also, in this vein, pacing is incredibly important. You can ask for extra time on assignments and flexible deadlines. You can seek alternative testing measures. You can use mobility aids. You deserve to access your education in the way that makes you feel most comfortable.
Students using mobility aids.
And then the last piece of advice I have to offer is to find loved ones and community members who believe you and are willing to fight alongside you and excited to do so. I have found so much support in my disabled friends and fellow activists, and
Casey in a supportive group of disabled people.
I guess the last thing I'll say is, know that you're an activist simply by existing as a disabled student. It can be so challenging, and just showing up and knowing that you belong there and that you want to work towards your education, I think is so critical. And you don't have to be doing a million things at once. You just you can be an activist just being yourself. Yeah, I am so honored to have won this award. With a disability like ME, I often feel very isolated, especially as my disabilities and the ongoing pandemic makes gathering in person for experiences very inaccessible to me. And so being in community with amazing activists and students who have won this award just makes things feel much less lonely for me, and also, really brings me a lot of hope, because I look out and I can see, there are so many people fighting for disability justice and accessibility. A lot of my why really comes from anger, knowing that disabled people cannot exist safely in the world the way that it is. And I try to channel both my anger and my privilege into disability justice activism. And I'm so grateful for opportunities like this to share my story and to find community in new places. Yeah, I think the only thing I would want to reiterate is, I made the point about simply existing is activism, and that's actually kind of a quote and an idea from an activist I really admire with ME named Whitney Defoe, who has written about how, and other folks with disabilities have written about this too, that resistance is a form, or just existing is a form of resistance. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember, is that you don't have to be showing up to every protest or doing phone banks every day, but just seeking a happy life as a disabled person is a form of activism and a form of resistance. And I think that's something that I would want disabled students to remember, is that as long as they're trying to show up, and that's you don't have to be doing a million things to be worthy of a safe and affirming education and life. So I think that's what I would add.
Whitney Defoe.
I do the work that I do first to honor those who have come before me who didn't have access to the things that I have access to, and for those who will come after me who deserve safe access to every part of life. And that includes education and, expands out from there. And we still have so far to go in ensuring equitable access for all disabled people. I am particularly passionate about fighting for people with ME and other post-viral energy-limiting disabilities because we've been ignored, disbelieved, questioned, for so many years. And actually, the slogan for ME Action is called Millions Missing. And that's because people with ME are often missing from our lives, our schools, our relationships, from research, from the media, from government funding, and so much more. And I also know that this work is so urgently needed, right at this moment. With respect to ME, the ongoing COVID pandemic continues to cause mass preventable death and disability, including skyrocketing cases of ME. So I know that change is long overdue. And then with respect to education, all students deserve safe, affirming access to their schooling. And I add affirming in there because it's not just, the bar shouldn't just be safe access. It should be, exciting. Like you should be excited to go to school. You shouldn't just, disabled students just shouldn't have to scrape by. Going to school and accessing their education should be a joyful, exciting experience. And I think that that's what we should really strive for.
Disabled students happy to be in school.
Thank you, Casey, for sharing your story with us. You can find out more about Casey in the links in our description, as well as more about all of the orgs that have come together to allow this award to happen. We have 5 other winners of the Heumann-Armstrong Award this year, so check out their videos on the channel, as well as the videos from the winners from their 2 previous years. Lead on, everyone.